Welcome everyone to our May chapter meeting. And before we get started, I'd like to take a minute and mention a few of our upcoming events. We have the Atlanta Braves game scheduled for June 13th at SunTrust Park, along with our Regional 9 partners from North Carolina, South Carolina, and Alabama. And we currently have 8 tickets left, so if you're interested in joining us for that event, please see Kelly Mills, our chapter administrator. On June 21st, the Georgia CCIM chapter will be with the Georgia Society of CPAs at their real estate conference, and we're having our August chapter meeting on August 9th. A couple of educational offerings that we have upcoming this year. We're going to have a commercial real estate negotiations course that's going to be held on September 4th. We're going to have the financial analysis, which is our 101 course, that's going to be September 10th through the 13th. Our 103 course, which is the user decision analysis course, is going to be October 22nd through the 25th. And our 104 course, which is the investment analysis course, is going to be November 5th through the 8th. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to turn it over to Bill Adams real quick. He wants to say a couple of words.
I just want to talk to you just for a second about the Panther Athletic Club. I'm a double graduate of Georgia State, and I'm not going to steal any of Charlie's thunder about what's going on down here, but it's transformative for downtown Atlanta and this part of the city. And the Panther Athletic Club really supports both the men's and women's programs all throughout the university, athletic programs. And so some great young kids, a lot of them first-time college graduates in their family, like I was. And so I'm going to pass this out each table, and you please, especially if you're GSU graduates, there's absolutely no excuse not to join the pack. But for all you other Atlanta folks who want to come to see exciting Division I football that's not Georgia Tech in Atlanta, and the best basketball team in the state, and a very terrific softball and other sports too. We'll actually have the only Division men's soccer team in the state too. So anyway, I'll be passing these out.
All right, thank you, Bill. So with that, allow me to introduce our moderator for today's panel, who's Dexter Warrior. He's a principal with T. Dallas Smith and Company, and Dexter is going to introduce our illustrious panel here this morning. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Dexter.
Good afternoon. First of all, I'm not going to introduce the panel because the panels were introduced via email. So if you didn't read your email to read the bios, I'm not going to take time to introduce them because we know we only have a short period of time, and our goal is really just go ahead and jump right into the content of what we want to talk about today. So we appreciate everybody coming out. Obviously, we're on the campus of Georgia State University. We'll get into some more statistics about Georgia State in just a minute, but what I thought would be helpful to do is to step back and just look at downtown Atlanta from a top-down perspective. I mean, all of us are seeing across the country there's an reurbanization of cities across America, and Atlanta has not been on the back burner of that. We've been on the leading edge of also seeing that urbanization where back in the 70s, well, really back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, into the 90s, there's a huge wave of folks moving out to the suburbs. There's been a huge wave across the country. Again, hey, Scott, how you doing? People move out to the suburbs. So now the pendulum is swinging back the other direction, not only in Atlanta, but across other major cities across America. There's been a big growth, a surgence back, refocusing the efforts in downtowns and downtown cores. So I thought it'd be interesting for Jennifer just to open it up and give us her perspective on, here we are today. We're in 2018. We're in downtown Atlanta. Downtown Atlanta is obviously at a spot that's different from Midtown, it's different from Buckhead. So based upon where we are today, Jennifer, how would you kind of tell us about the story of why would downtown Atlanta be attractive today versus 10, 15 years ago, 20 years ago?
Sure, and thank you. I'll maybe a quick word first about how we define downtown, and which actually then makes me think that maybe there's a few people in the crowd that didn't read your email. But I work for an organization called Central Atlanta Progress. We're a business membership organization focused on the economic health and quality of life in downtown. We leverage the city's civic and business interests on projects and programs, frankly, to make downtown healthy. And so for us, downtown is the commercial core of the city. So think about the area south of North Avenue, really over to Boulevard on the east side. Down here, we can debate whether we're in downtown or we're in the Summerhill neighborhood, but we think of the new Summerhill development in downtown, over to Northside Drive, near Mercedes-Benz Stadium. So that's a pretty diverse, it's 4 square miles. It's pretty significant economic base in the city, and really a mix of uses. And so to Dexter's point, I think it's hard to tell a crowd of real estate professionals, right? There's academic reasons why markets thrive, right? You have to have buildings and sites and access to the places. You need a healthy economy. You know, Atlanta, I think, finally in the past couple of years recovering in our job growth. So creating more jobs means people living here, living their lives, building houses, renting apartments. So I think that's really critical to the core thriving. And then policies, right? We need city government and leaders who are committed to growth and wanting to see things happen. And I would argue that the city of Atlanta as a whole has certainly been on the rise in their commitment to investment, recruiting businesses, and development to come to the city. And that has certainly benefited us in downtown. Beyond the academic reasons and sort of those fundamentals, I think we see frankly, just changing attitudes. And if you think, again, about like, people's individual decisions and why you live somewhere or where you want to work, people's attitudes about urban locations, they're seeking out places that are a mix of uses, that aren't separated, where you have to drive to everything that you do. They want something that's more authentic and unique, that can't be found necessarily just anywhere. And so those are qualities that downtown, I think, has had for quite some time, but really weren't exposed, and people weren't aware of that. And I when I say downtown, I would expand that a little bit to really neighborhoods and districts throughout the city of Atlanta. If you think about, the Beltline, it's hard not to look at as you're walking through a neighborhood that it's always been there, but you're seeing it through new eyes because you have new access. And I think that's just going to continue to change and make our city even more robust. So and then I think the last thing I'll mention, and not to steal thunder from my colleagues, but then you need to have visionaries and leaders who see all that potential and are willing to spend their time, money, and resources to bring it to fruition. And so I think we've been fortunate that some of those fundamental characteristics, riding the momentum of bigger market dynamics, and then having folks that want to realize that potential really leads to some pretty significant momentum, which I think we'll talk about today.
One additional question, and I'm going to move on to Charlie. How do you think the convention and tourism business impacts the urban, the center of our city, core of our city, because this is the heart of that district. That part of our economy is really housed in the central business district.
No, it's really when you live it every day, it's hard not to see the impact that 15,000 hotel rooms in one walkable district connected to the number 3 convention facility in the country, plus now Mercedes-Benz attracting really marquee events still coming up, the Super Bowl, NCAA Final Four. We can debate how many tens of millions of people that means are coming, but visitors want to do the things, they want to see our city the same way that residents see it. They're looking for unique things in restaurants and places that tell them what it's Atlanta like. What am I learning about Atlanta by being here? And I think we've seen that shift happening from what was just convention. Really, you might come for 2 days. Our airport makes it incredibly easy to get in and out of Atlanta. But now, maybe I'm going to stay and I'm going to go check out the aquarium, or I'm going to stay a little bit longer because I've heard about this amazing exhibit at the High, and then I'm going to go, walk on the Beltline. So I think the dynamic of who's coming is changing. And then, I mean, we've had really off the charts numbers as far as just the occupancy in hotels, room rate is up, and just the total number of visitors. So it's really, I think, been one of those sort of undergirding components of our economy that maybe you don't see day in and day out. Unless you build hotels, which is quite a popular business to be in. Just heard about another one today, the Wyndham, so that is proposed just near Centennial Olympic Park. So,
Thank you, Jennifer. We'll come back and ask Jennifer some more questions later. Just to segue over to Charlie, who's athletic director at Georgia State University. Georgia State University, these stats will speak for themselves. They speak volumes. This is pre-Dr. Cobb Patton. Noah Langdon obviously was a long-term president, started off Georgia State University many years ago. Excellent foundation for academics. Fast forward to Dr. Cobb Patton, who's the president, starting around 1992. He was a city planner. For those who've been around Atlanta, you know the name Cobb Patton. He really just opened his campus up, and then of course Dr. Becker's president. So pre-Cobb Patton, there were 27 acres of land that Georgia State sat on. Post-Cobb Patton, 55 acres of land. Today, Georgia State sits on 110 acres of land, controls 110 acres of land. Since we're talking about real estate, folks, you'll appreciate this statistic. Pre-Cobb Patton, about 3.5 million of gross square feet. Post-Cobb Patton, about 7.3 million gross square feet of space. Today, Georgia State has 13.3 million square feet of gross space. Dormitory beds, 0 pre-Cobb Patton. December 2008, post-Cobb Patton, 2,556 rooms. Today, GSU dormitories controlled by Georgia State, 5,281, with another 972 units not controlled by Georgia State. So we went from 0 dormitories to 6,253 dormitories today. Plus, let me rephrase, I apologize. There's 972 under construction today in terms of beds, not dormitories, beds. These are beds, just clarification. 2,556 beds, 5,281 beds today, and then 972 additional beds under construction. So we're looking at 6,200 beds that are here today on campus, plus another 650 beds that are under construction. So we'll be at almost 7,000 beds basically at this time next year. So Georgia State has had a phenomenal growth, and obviously this last big addition was the former Ted Turner Stadium, which is now controlled by Georgia State University. So my question to you, Charlie, is why now? Georgia State has been around 100 years, celebrated 100 years about 5 years ago. I think it's celebrated 100-year anniversary. So the university's been around for a while. I mean, obviously you had great leadership between Dr. Patton, who opened the campus up, and Dr. Becker taking it to even higher levels. But what do you think about athletics? I mean, why all of a sudden athletics start becoming such an important role to Georgia State University?
You know, I appreciate you guys coming out today, and I like what was said a little bit earlier about you get a chance to see something with new eyes. And so probably everybody in this room has been to a Braves game. There are probably some people in the room like myself actually that were here for the opening ceremonies when the Olympics were here. And to now see it repurposed for really a second time in the stadium, it's an exciting time for us. And part of that growth, I really think it points back to why now, or why are we in this cycle. It points back to vision, it points back to leadership, and it starts with Mark and anybody who's had an opportunity to either be around Mark Becker or engage with Mark. He's a very driven person, and he's a very, very driven personality, and kind of demands and expects innovation, expects opportunities for growth. And you know, the opportunity for us with the stadium, if you look at the university as a whole, aspirationally, we look a lot like schools with the name of a Memphis or Central Florida or a Temple. Urban institutions, big student populations, core of the city, partners within those communities, with one big exception. The athletics programs at Georgia State compared to those schools, you don't necessarily make the same connection, if you will. And it was fascinating for me when I came, and I'd worked in Atlanta prior and came back, was perceptionally when you look at those schools, if you take every academic matrix that you could put together that you would in terms of comparing schools. If you're looking to go to school, or if your kids are looking to go to school, Georgia State blows that group of schools away. And it's a little bit of an untold story, hence why you see a lot of the advertising at the airport, why you see the billboards around town of trying to sell that story. The challenge, the opportunity, the growth for us, and selfishly what's the exciting part for the role I get to play in this thing is athletics is a core part of this growth process. And in our world, to grow, you got to have facilities. Bar none speaks to commitment. And as I like to explain to my friends that are in the academic world, we have a very strong science program on this campus. You may or may not be aware of that, but we've got 2 science centers built right next to the sports arena and a 3rd one on the way. We've invested, I think, close to $180 million in those 2 science centers in the last 10 years, with another $90 million to come. So we're making a strong academic push for science. Well, what do you have to do that? It speaks commitment if you have facilities. And it's the same world in athletics. If you want to talk about having the best basketball program in the state of Georgia, or talk about a growth of a football program or all the other sports that are there, you need the facilities to grow. It speaks commitment to what you're doing in terms of your recruitment, to your staff, and also to the university as a whole. So that's a real short answer for us, is that it's, at the end of the day, for us to be a holistic university, the athletic program has to, frankly, meet the greatness of the university. And then as an umbrella, we've got to tell our story and continue to tell our story and be a little bit more aggressive about telling our story. Muhammad Ali had a great statement at one time. He said, when he was asked about being the greatest, he said, how do you feel about it? And he responded and said, it's not bragging when you can back it up. And the reality of that is, for us, is that we have aspirations. We need to tell our story and not be apologetic for what our story is.
Charlie, with regards to this corridor that we're sitting in right now, starting up by the former Olympic torch, I know there's a proposal to bring on a convocation center. Georgia State has decided to partner with Carter to redevelop this corridor. Just from a big picture perspective, I mean, kind of timeline, what do you see coming as some of the priorities of the corridor? I know Carter's controlling some of the redevelopment in conjunction with Georgia State. Georgia State will keep owning the land that the projects Carter, will develop on. But kind of, you got some nice pictures out front too that you might want to ask people to take a look at before they have to have already seen them.
Yeah, I think if you're interested in what the property and house being developed, there are a number of slides outside in the lobby as you walked in to kind of speaks to what the overall vision for this is and what we're trying to accomplish. From a timeline perspective, I think it's kind of one of those things that we got to a point where we're in a hurry to own the property. Obviously, selfishly for us, we wanted to play football games in the stadium this past August, and so from really January to August, our focus was getting the stadium refurbished, if you will, to host Georgia State football, and frankly, not look like a baseball stadium that hosts football games, but to actually be a football stadium, and we're pretty excited what's been accomplished in that regard. We received the funding for the Convocation Center, for the design part of the Convocation Center, which actually, if you look out the window, it's the north end of the property. It's the actual old Georgia's driver services lot. I laughed. I moved back here 3.5 years ago. I get my driver's license, and I rode around that trailer for about 3 weeks trying to figure out exactly where this building was to get your driver's license. And so, it's fascinating to know now that's our, so the deal is to spend this next year designing what this 8,000 seat facility will look like, multi-purpose facility will look like, and then go back and ask for a lot of the construction money. The university has to fund part of it as well to make it happen with, an aggressive date of saying we're going to open the Convocation Center December 20, January 2021. So certainly, obviously, an exciting part for us. And then, from an athletics end, we've got an opportunity to build a baseball stadium on the former footprint of Fulton County Stadium. The athletic director keeps trying to push that on the left side of that, let's put a softball field next to it. So we've got a nice facility and a nice complex in the mix of all this mixed use that's going on. Carter is going to build a dorm here at the bottom left side of the red light, if you will, but the bottom left of this student housing. And you mentioned a little bit earlier about if you're in the apartment business. Well, it seems like if you're in the student dorm apartment business, it's kind of a cottage industry of itself in downtown. And so you can't build enough dorms to satisfy us, because it gives our kids an opportunity to have a place to live. Frankly, a little bit selfish of it is maybe it brings the rents down some, because it's not exactly inexpensive to live in the downtown area. And the more we can create a livability of our campus, the 24/7, 7-day-a-week livability, I think it's going to continue to help grow and drive the life on our campus and kind of back away from that commuter aspect of the connotation that is the university. But Carter's got great plans. If you haven't seen what's being proposed down Georgia Avenue here in the next couple of months, selfishly, as somebody who likes to eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner without missing a meal, we've got one place to walk out the building and eat now, and the thought or idea of having 7 or 8 more in August, certainly our staff is very, very excited about that opportunity. But it gets us into the neighborhood and starts pulling people down through here, and it's an exciting opportunity. Scott was here yesterday. We hosted a group yesterday from San Diego State University, and if you know a little bit about San Diego, the Chargers left to go to LA, and so there's a nice 55,000 seat stadium that looks like a lot like the old Fulton County Stadium where San Diego State plays their football games. They're trying to mimic what we've done here with this property in terms of buying the acreage, the parking lots, and then turning into mixed use. And the different challenges is California is a little bit different than Georgia in terms of support for higher education. The value of the property of where that stadium sits is probably 3, maybe 4 times greater than the property here, and then they've got a few more competing interests in terms of people who are interested in developing that space. But it was fascinating for us to host a group of about 20, including their president, and explain to them, here's what we've done, the business deal with the city and with Carter and the athletics piece, and for them to walk out with a newfound respect for what the university is about.
Thanks, Charlie. Catherine Kelly, last but not least. So we went from obviously a big picture with Jennifer talking about the downtown corridor, Georgia State owning 165 acres of land in downtown Atlanta. You fast forward, Catherine Kelly and her partners at Newport USA Real Estate have decided to make a big plunge into downtown Atlanta. How many people have heard about how much real estate Newport owns in downtown Atlanta? Just a few of you. So Norfolk Southern's building. How many know what the former buildings on Spring Street are occupied by Norfolk Southern? So that corridor moved out. How many people went to the former Rich's department store years ago? Retail gone. I'm going to take you way back now. How many people remember the former CNS Bank building on Mitchell Street? So some of the areas I'm talking about, what about is it Kessler's?
Yeah.
Kessler's building.
Kessler's, yeah.
All those buildings back in that part of downtown, everybody kind of know where we're at right now? So that's the area I'm going to ask Catherine. So that area right now is pretty quiet, to say the least. It's been an area that's been overlooked for a very long period of time. And my question is, what on earth caused you guys to want to buy 45 to 50 buildings in downtown Atlanta? Seriously, all jokes aside, what inspired you to buy that much real estate quietly under the radar when nobody knew you were buying that much real estate, and then you wake up one day, you read the paper, your group, Newport, your partners own at least 45 buildings in downtown Atlanta? What inspired that? And she's a native Atlantan. She's been here. This is like third generation real estate professional. So you got a person here who knows about real estate, who's watched real estate her whole life. She grew up in a real estate family, so she knows real estate. So this visionary person and her colleagues know what they're doing. For some reason, they saw the vision. So help us out, Catherine.
Definitely part crazy, right? Well, I wanted to echo the thanks Jennifer and Charlie said. Really appreciate you all having us here this afternoon, and Dexter, really appreciate it. So Newport is a German firm. It's a private equity real estate and development firm based in Germany. Newport, about 2 years ago, hired a local team. I head up development, and then a gentleman, Jake Naraki, is the president of Newport here in the U.S. And Newport basically came and planted a flag in the U.S., headquartered here in Atlanta. And as Dexter said, for the past couple of years, we have been very quietly and diligently assembling real estate downtown. Just as a quick thumbnail, we now have about 47 buildings in an 8-city block area. So this is roughly where Alabama Street and the 5 Points MARTA station are, if you know that specifically. In underground Atlanta, we go from there south. And then our western boundary is Ted Turner, Spring Street. The southern boundary is Trinity, and then the eastern boundary is Pryor Street. So within that area, we have what's now about 800,000 square feet in these 47 buildings, and then about 4.5 acres of parking lots, which is about 1,000 parking spaces. As you know, a lot of buildings were torn down, so we have a lot of these holes in between and among the different buildings. So our plan is to focus first on the renovation of the historic buildings, and then later there's an exciting ground-up opportunity on the parking lots to build new development, which we think primarily will be multifamily rental units. But to get to your question, you know, it was interesting. I think there are a couple pieces to it. When Newport first came to Atlanta, as the story would go, my colleague Jake was taking them around looking at different site opportunities. And, you know, Newport, as Germans, you know, they get it, they understand the staying power of real estate and what it takes to have cities that stand the test of time. And they came to the heart of the city, downtown. They saw all this infrastructure, the density of employment. They saw this great stock of buildings and looked around and said, okay, what are we missing here? Why is this area of the city not taken off? And, you know, could we put this together in some way? And in fact, how much of this real estate do you think we could buy? And Jake said, well, pretty much all of it. And, you know, this was a neighborhood that was, I'd say, you know, it was basically abandoned. About 25% of the buildings of that 800,000 square feet were actually leased when we put the buildings together. But I think if we look, you know, more broadly about the themes that attracted us to it, one is we see all of the infrastructure. This is arguably the area that has the most dense transportation infrastructure anywhere in the city, with all the investment over decades from MARTA and bus and, of course, highway, streets, bicycle, everything is there. We believe that this set of buildings is the largest remaining set of commercial building fabric left in the city, and feel very fortunate that we've been able to put it together. So we were very much charmed by this beautiful set of historic buildings and all the stories of Riches and Haverty's and J.P. Allen and all the families that started their businesses there decades and decades ago. It's clearly the oldest part of the city, where the 0 mile marker is, the termination point for the railroad. It is the heart and soul of Atlanta. And as a native growing up here, and so much of our team are, you know, we're all natives, it is just one of these legacy opportunities that comes along in a lifetime. And so that's very much the magic, I think, that attracted us. We also see, and Jennifer alluded to some of this, you know, where we are in the market, there's a tremendous appetite for these adaptive reuse buildings that are a great fit for where companies and brands want to be. People want the grittiness, they want the authenticity, they want the texture that comes with older buildings, and the opportunity to blend old and new in a way that inspires innovation, and that's very important to the growth of so many companies in the market. So that raw material was really attractive to us from a real estate perspective. We were also intrigued by the fact that the arts had already discovered the neighborhood. Even before we arrived on the scene, there were a number of artist groups that were squatting in the buildings because it was cheap and or free real estate, and they were no doubt the tip of the spear, I call it, in terms of arts. But we love to follow artists and felt like this was a great part of the culture of the neighborhood and something that we very much wanted to carry forward. So I think, you know, infrastructure, history, arts, just the ability to assemble that much real estate in a contiguous area, all of those things were, I think, what attracted us.
So 47 buildings, 800,000 something square feet. You're envisioning a mixed-use development from retail to office to hotels to residential. What else?
Sure. Yeah. So just in simple terms, the 800,000 square feet is about 300,000 square feet of retail, 300,000 of office, sort of creative loft office on the upper floors, 300 residential units. Okay, so that's all in the old buildings. And then on the parking lots, we can add another 1,000 multifamily units. So all in, it will be about 1.6 million square feet, about a $500 million total development size. But, 1,300 residential units when you add the old and the new.
Wow. So in terms of the future of the area itself, who do you think will be populating it from a use perspective? I mean, how will you go out and find users to come and occupy this part of downtown Atlanta?
It's a great question. I think just strategically as a firm, we are big believers in street retail. And in terms of retail trends and themes, we feel like there's a really important future in street retail as the whole retail industry is struggling with malls and, the different sectors and the future of apparel. What's been interesting is because of the number of buildings that we have an opportunity to think about the whole master mix. And our vision is that there's a place for everyone. So because we can look at the whole portfolio, we can have a place for artists and nonprofits. We can have a place for the stronger credit, regional chains, for local restaurants. We really want to have a diverse mix of people, price points, tenants. We think that is what creates a real neighborhood and really what helps stand the test of time. So that whole dimension of affordability and inclusiveness and diversity is something that we want to reflect in the tenant mix and the customer mix as much as anything else. And I think having the ability to look at a whole neighborhood scale and plan from that perspective, as opposed to, for example, going in and buying one parcel, it's really hard to make the numbers work if you just have a very limited amount of real estate and you can't balance the diversity of price points.
Cool. Thank you. Charlie, one other question for you before I open up to the audience. A few weeks ago, you had some guests in the house. You had a first big event in the house. Can you explain to us how you plan to use this particular venue we're in for more than just Georgia State sports?
I think part of the vision of taking over the facility was we wanted a home for our football games, but also recognize the fact that you only have six dates a year to use it. And we also, part of the conversation we knew going into it with the neighborhoods and being a good, if you will, part of this area, and being respectful, we weren't going to have 90 baseball games a year. So the crowds weren't going to be the same and the impact wasn't going to be the same, but we were going to look to do somewhere between 12 and 15 stadium events in addition, or including our football games. And honestly, part of the legacy the Braves have left us or events like this or 5Ks, 10Ks, a lot of use of the parking lots for community events that we've, I think first operationally we all were like, holy cow, this is a lot of extra work. But then, as I was telling somebody the other day, when you ride through and you realize that the Hunger Walk was here a couple of weeks ago, and if anybody participated, there's a month of free publicity, not only for the university, but for the stadium to talk about it. We're going to do a Hunger Walk from Georgia State Stadium. And so part of that brand, the brand building that goes on. But, we've had a plan in place to do some other events. I can say it now because it's passed, but we thought we were going to have U2 playing here in September to open up the stadium, and that fell through literally probably 12 hours before we were going to announce it. And that was kind of a little bit of a letdown to think this is a great event to kind of kickstart the transformation to the university. But later on in the fall, got a phone call from one of the concert promoters in town about this group called the Foo Fighters. And of course, I'm the idiot when I was talking to him. I thought he said Food Fighters, and I'm dead serious. I go and Google it. And it's a bunch of animated characters. And you think these guys are going to put 30,000 people in this stadium? And but for me, years ago, I used to work for the Dome when it opened and did the sales and the marketing stuff, and so I had a sense of the personalities involved, but the idea of a concert, and needless to say, for us, it was certainly an opportunity for us to showcase the facility in terms of what we've done, and to put 32,000 people. For anybody that was here, I'd like to think you had a pretty good time. I know the band had a great time, and in the world we live in, and I don't mean to offend anybody, but if you were here, the lead singer called it, thankful for being at the big-ass stadium. And if he said it once, he said it, I think, 14,000 times. And so our Twitter page for the stadium, we changed it to that. Obviously, we're in the recruiting world, so we sent it to a lot of high school kids that, are interested in playing football and want to play in a big venue. And so we got a lot of, there's always legs to every story, and so you got to mark it through. But if you don't know, there's a spring football league that's being started up. And we're going the Atlanta. There's 8 teams, and Atlanta's going to have a team, and they're going to play here starting in spring of 19. So that gives us 6 dates: January, February, March, into April of next year, and they're going to try to make a 3-year run at it. Unlike the XFL or unlike some of the other spring leagues that started, they've got some serious money behind it. A lot of former players are behind it. And they've also already got a TV contract with CBS. So, and Michael Vick, if you hadn't heard, Michael Vick's going to be the offensive coordinator. So a lot of parallels with the NFL. They try to stay away from that, but we certainly think it's going to be an additional bonus for us from operating the stadium and then some other things through it. The only thing we've asked is I think blue needs to be one of the colors in their case, because I told them, as a school whose primary color is blue and to play in a stadium that was red for all those years, you miss a little bit of ownership, even not. So, but we'll see where that goes. But if we can do one concert a year, it's a great opportunity for us. We think, Mercedes-Benz, if you think about it, I think Kenny Chesney's there this weekend is in, if it's 50,000 seats, we don't have that capacity, and it's intentional. But if you're in a spot of 25 to 40,000 seats, that's what we can accommodate out here, and it's not something they would really be interested in from a financial standpoint. Tech has grass, and so I think concerts are a little bit of a thing in the past for Tech, just for the maintenance and the upkeep you have to have when you do a big stadium show like that. So we've kind of got a sweet spot, and their group's still out there that can hit that number. If we can do 2 a year, it's an exceptional opportunity for us.
Thank you, Charlie. Appreciate it. Questions from the audience? Questions from the audience?
I was just going to ask Catherine what the time frame is. What the time frame of the development is.
Okay. So we are doing 2 phases. The first phase will be the renovation of the historic buildings, and that will be over the next 3 to 4 years. We should have the first deliveries at about the end of next year and on into early 20. And then the new ground up would be years 5 through 10. So it's a 10-year project, but the renovation of the historic buildings is in the first 3 or 4 years.
And the events plus that made me, if you haven't been to South Downtown or that part of downtown in a while, there is an event happening this Friday night. There's always something happening in downtown, trust me. We track permits for road closures and special events. But this Friday night, a street party on Broad Street, which is sort of the premier walkable sort of great urban street in the middle of their district, for the Atlanta Cycling Festival. So it's free, everybody's welcome. If you want to check out some of the buildings and see what we're talking about, come on down, 6 o'clock Friday.
Yeah, I was wondering about
Ride your relay bike. It's also the 1-year anniversary of the city's bike share program. Or if you're more adventurous, grab yourself a bird scooter and try to kill yourself on your electric scooter coming to Broad Street.
Bill.
This is for Catherine. Do you have a plan B in place if Amazon comes to the Gulch?
I don't think it's a plan B. I think it's the same plan. We're not, physically big enough to accommodate Amazon, but we like to think of ourselves as the creative, funky neighborhood next to the Gulch, and really next to everything around, next to Summerhill and Georgia State, next to the Gulch, next to Underground. We're sort of in the middle of all that, and we very much want to connect physically and programmatically so that we can be the sort of funky crossroads where people can walk and go have dinner and hang out on Broad Street and, just let that be the neighborhood that really serves and supports and ties to everything around us.
Jen, from a follow-up on Bill's question, he asked about the Gulch. We know that obviously the Hawks putting in about $190 million, I believe, to redevelop Phillips Arena, and the brother of the Hawks player, whose name slips me right now.
Tony Ressler.
Thank you. Tony Ressler's brother and his investment group have rights to the Gulch, or they've purchased some land. They actually bought the former Norfolk Southern site.
Yeah.
So talk to us about
yeah. CCIM
that
Group has closed on all four, actually, of the Norfolk Southern buildings. There are 2 older white terracotta brick buildings and then 2 more modern red brick buildings, and that came with 12 or so acres of surface parking lots as well. And they're actually, their SAP has been approved. They're doing interior demolition and remediation of those buildings now for a residential use in partnership with Stream Realty. So that will deliver next year. They are under contract with Norfolk Southern for acquisition of the remaining 60, 70 acres of what we affectionately call the Gulch, but the really both surface air rights of the land that is below Centennial Olympic Park Drive, Ted Turner Drive, and the MLK viaducts. And they have been going through a master planning and special administrative permit approval process with the City of Atlanta that is expected to be approved. We're almost, I think it's going to be June now, but in several weeks. So, but it's under contract.
Sim.
Catherine, this is for you about your project. We all have been down those roads to have zoning and permits and all those kind of things, and where they say, "What do you mean I got to plant 10,000 trees?" and those kind of things. So, have you come across anything that has surprised you when you're trying to get permits and zoning and all that? Is all that in place?
It's an interesting question. I think the only thing, it's been a positive surprise, I will say. We have worked very closely with CAP on a very sort of comprehensive plan to redo all the streets in the neighborhood. So in that 8 city block grid, we proposed to the city the idea of widening the sidewalks, converting MLK and Mitchell to 2-way traffic, adding street trees, and taking that the lanes that are the furthest out to become a mix of Uber, Lyft, drop-off, parallel parking, wider sidewalks, etc. And partnered with CAP to propose that to the city. And I think the positive and pleasant surprise was how quickly they approved it and very much embraced the idea. We went through city council. It was approved last October. And the idea and the opportunity to transform an entire neighborhood of streets is really exciting and really important to the success of everything on the streets. And I think we thought this could be just the most painful, dragged out process because there's so many stakeholders in any street. And we were pleasantly surprised how quickly it went through and was approved and embraced by the city. So that's been a good thing.
I'm going to put another plug for Catherine. For those who don't know it, Catherine Kelly was the mastermind with the folks at Jamestown who completed, I'm going to sing your mom right, Ponce City Marketplace. Thank you. Appreciate it. Ponce City Marketplace. So anyway, she's got experience in dealing with the city of Atlanta and her colleagues. So I just want to put a plug in for Catherine because, again, for those who've been to the Ponce City Marketplace, you guys know that's a phenomenal development. But Catherine was responsible for that with her colleagues.
All right. Well, that was part of mine. But Charlie, you mentioned the science, and of course we've used the word transformation of Georgia. I always want to say this correctly, Georgia State. What I'm wondering is whether or not, as you all are moving about with the new developments and development in particular, how you are employing the concept of technology and artificial intelligence, if you will, and the things that you're doing, how that might even be impacted or influenced with the development of the Science Center that's coming up.
Yeah, I'm going to speak a little bit out of school only because I get to be the athletic guy. I let the brainiacs deal with the science. I think the easiest way to explain it is that if it's new and it's innovative and it can be done, it's being put into those facilities and candidly any new building on our campus. Mark seems he's a gadget guy, I guess, about the easiest way to say it. We had a situation where, you guys probably don't notice, but if you're a state of Georgia, you can, with a driver's license, you can walk into the library on campus. And we had a safety issue going on, and then all of a sudden it got to being, is it a fingerprint, is it a retinal scan, is it, and I'm going, why don't you swipe an ID and get in a building? So it's, we walk into these conversations every day because of the corridor, where we are and being in downtown. So I'd give you false advice if I knew exactly all the things that were going on in the Science Center. I'm thankful that my dad was a high school calculus teacher, not a biology teacher, because I'm not their target. So it's and very few of our kids are. We do have several outstanding students that are in the biology. Our faculty rep, which in our world is we have one professor from campus who is supposed to be the one that keeps me in control, if you will, and he's a world-class microbiologist. So I get it from him, but these are words I can't pronounce. So.
Any of that being employed in development?
Yeah, well, I think back to the streets conversation, we are trying to collectively plan streets that embrace any future transportation technologies, and we don't know exactly what that will be. Is it autonomous vehicles? Is there an autonomous bus loop? Are there technologies with rideshare and other mobility options? But I think what we wanted to do with the new street plan is to create zones and nodes that are receptive to those advances and try to have the flexibility that we can incorporate those technologies as they evolve in the neighborhood and help wean people off the automobile. I think our goal would be to develop our way out of the parking lots and not have to replace all that parking, because if we don't do it in the middle of downtown, where will it ever happen? So we're hoping that with technology, we can advance that whole conversation and really be a little bit of a pilot study for the rest of the city if possible.
And I mean, I think it's infiltrated really the entire economy, right? The really creative, innovative things that are happening at Georgia State University, those students are then commercializing those things. They're in incubators on campus, then they grow and they need office space, and then we've created a submarket in Atlanta around innovation and technology that's driving companies to locate here, and then they are creating products that then get translated and actually used out in the real world. A perfect example is this. It's a traffic sensors. We all travel around with our, the big data, and you're traveling around with your GPS on your phone. Well, we're tracking you now when you come in and out of downtown. We know when you came in, we know how long you stayed and how long it took you to get out, and then using that data to synchronize and optimize the traffic signal systems, which make it easier to get in and out for big events. But all of that technology came from a startup in Georgia through kids educated here, and then get deployed through partnerships at the city of Atlanta out into the street to test it. So, those sorts of things are happening in small parts everywhere, I think, in our economy, and tend to touch. They need space, it's connected to the university, and I think those stories are the things that, the Department of Economic Development and Invest Atlanta and the Chamber are all telling the world about what's happening here and why the economy stays strong because of that idea.
So, and I'll tell you, in the world we live in, I can tell you that if Alabama gets a turnover inside the 50, 47% of the time they're going to score a touchdown. If it's first and goal at 10, there's one of two plays going on. That's the artificial intelligence world we live in. So.
Thanks, Charlie. Here's another question.
Too much data.
So first of all, I just really want to applaud everything that you've done in the community here. As an in-towner, I'm very proud of that, because for many, many years, people would be distressed about coming downtown. And it's really the revitalization.
I don't know what they're afraid of. That's a whole other topic.
Yeah, so that's wonderful. So I'm just getting back in town from a lender servicer platform, and stay tuned, because that's going to be part of our summer programming here with CCIM. But hearing from the different lenders and agencies, Freddie, Fannie, and green initiatives, and everything that they have in the pipeline, where do you see this in our transformation of downtown, in these office buildings, retail, and multifamily mixed use?
You mean from a lender perspective, or
No, just from the development side. So we're seeing that the initiatives are there and available. So how does this partnership, how do we create more of this?
Well, money helps, right? I mean, this all got, I joke, but, obviously, Newport has its sources, all the projects we've talked about, but frankly, even the infrastructure, right? That we're being more creative in how we leverage public money and public-private partnerships, that, you have to keep fueling that engine to make it happen. So I don't know that I'm the expert on that topic, but it certainly has our experience has been that it tends a little bit to your previous point, is that we're much more downtown as a submarket understood and appreciated by people who aren't from Atlanta, and that a lot of out-of-town investment in that has just continued to flow in that model, because they see others making those investments from out of the state or out of the country, and that is just continuing. Even today, I had a meeting with another investor that's buying a piece of property downtown, and they're not from here; they're Australian.
Catherine,
Or Chinese.
You want to respond to that also with regards to Newport's views on sustainability?
Sure. I think it's important to think about sustainability in multiple dimensions. A lot of times when you hear sustainability, you think about LEED certification of a building and adding green gizmos to, your ground-up building, for example. But we're really trying to think about the transportation piece in particular downtown. And as I said earlier, I think in response to another question, if we don't leverage the transportation infrastructure downtown, where in the world can we do it in the city? And we really have to be aggressive about that and really work hard to wean people off the automobile and that dependence. And I think that, in turn, if we can roll that into other parts of the city, is really going to have a transformative impact on the whole metro region. But that's an area that we're laser focused on, just as one aspect of sustainability.
And I completely missed the sustainability part of that. So I'm going to say two things. If you haven't heard about the Atlanta Better Buildings Challenge, which is a nationwide Department of Energy challenge that the city of Atlanta is leading, meaning that we have reduced water use in an inventory of over 90 million square foot of buildings in the city by 20% already, and we're at 17% on energy. So if your buildings and your clients are not participating, it's really a great program that's moving the needle, so look into it. And the city, in collaboration through Invest Atlanta, are about to launch a PACE financing tool to help buildings finance those improvements. So if you're not plugged in on those things, I can help hook you up. I'm sorry I missed the sustainability.
Hi, to Jennifer. We don't hear much about the multimodal station anymore. What's the status of that?
So if you interpret the multimodal terminal as an investment of public funds in a transportation center that would connect commuter rail, intercity bus, local bus, to all the other new transportation modes, to put it bluntly, there is no political support in the city or state to make that public investment in that facility. The conversation with CIM, now that they have the Gulch under control, is that how do we preserve the access to that site, that when the transportation infrastructure catches up, when commuter rail kind of is really better appreciated as a way to move around the southeast, and we need the place to make that connectivity, how do we have it happen at this site? So without public money at this point, CIM is not going to deliver a multimodal terminal. But they're buying property from Norfolk Southern, so there will be protected rail corridors and really complicated easements that will allow, there's 60 freight trains a day that go through the Gulch. Those will continue, so that as these modes come online, they could still make that connection at the site. But it's a really, I think, I've been talking about this, and Bill, I know you probably have too, for decades, and the political support in our region and state for commuter rail particularly, or passenger rail generally, is just not there. And so we have some work to do, as Catherine was saying, about how we really connect all of these different modes to support the density that's going to get built in the city.
Catherine.
I just wanted to add one thing, going all the way back to your original question. And you were very nice to say some nice things about the work that I've been involved with. But I also wanted to put in a plug for my two co-panelists. Having worked in so many different parts of the city and different projects, we are so fortunate to have CAP and all the work that they do, and Jennifer and AJ and their team. It's unbelievable the heavy lifting that they do, helping us navigate, the halls of City Hall, and it's you know, as you all know in the industry, there's a lot of grind to getting a project done, and CAP does an incredible job, and I want to make sure everyone knows what all they're doing behind the scenes. And then also with Georgia State, one of the many things that attracted us to downtown was the fact that there were students there. And students like to walk, and they don't need a car, and they live downtown, and they love edgier neighborhoods, and they will come and eat.
As I said, they eat a lot, to keep with Charlie's theme.
Right. And they love entertainment, and we are so grateful that just as SCAD did in Savannah, that Georgia State was out there ahead of everybody, planting a flag in downtown and bringing great customers, great students, great people to the neighborhood. So we're just lucky as a developer to kind of ride along behind these guys and come to the neighborhoods.
Amen. Go Panthers.
So let's give our panelists a hand.
I want to let everybody know that Patrick Marsden with the athletic staff is going to do a tour of the stadium right now. So if anybody wants to do a tour, just go out the door right there and we'll join Patrick. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Dexter. You did a great job.